All right, hello everybody, and welcome to the Colorado Basin River Forecast Center's Utah Water Supply Briefing for January. I'm Patrick Cormus, a hydrologist here, forecaster for the Great Basin, and I'll also be presenting forecasts from Brenda Alcorn and Trevor Grout. As always, these webinars and briefings are going to be recorded. Feel free to raise your hand or type in questions throughout the webinar, and we'll try to get to them as soon as we can. And if you raise a hand, I'll try to monitor that, and we could just unmute and answer questions. We're a small enough group that we can keep it relatively informal. So as a review, the water supply briefing will cover the Bear, Weber, Six Creeks, and Provo River basins, as well as the Duchesne, Price, and then the Sevier and the Virgin River basins as well. The briefing will cover a quick precipitation review, then we can talk about the current snowpack and fall soil moisture conditions, get into some water supply forecasts, and then wrap it up with what kind of error you can expect in upcoming weather. All right, so here's a review of the water year precipitation so far. So October, November, and December precipitation. The graph on the left here is showing river basins on the x-axis here and percent of average on the y-axis. I put a cyan line across where, normal monthly precipitation would be. So in the Bear, Weber, Six Creeks, Utah Lake, and Sevier, we saw below normal October precipitation and above normal November and December precipitation. The December precipitation and percent of normals colored in blue for all of these. In the Duchesne River Basin, we saw below average October and November precipitation, but well above normal December precipitation. And then in the Virgin River Basin, we saw well above normal November precipitation, above normal December precipitation, but still we started off with below normal precipitation in October. That middle plot here is kind of the same idea except water year precipitation. So we have river basins across the x-axis and percent of normal on the y-axis. Once again, we put a dotted cyan line at 100% of normal, so that would be normal precipitation. So this is kind of total October through end of December precipitation or water year precipitation. And you can see that we have received above normal precipitation in all of the river basins here, although the Duchesne River Basin is just a little bit over normal at 103% of average. So here's what that looks like kind of in a map view. This is monthly precipitation for October on your left. You can see we saw below normal precipitation across the entire state of Utah pretty much. The center map there is the November precipitation and more of a mixed bag where we saw above normal precipitation in the kind of upper Great Basin and down in the Virgin River Basin and the southern Sevier River Basin, and then kind of below normal to normal-ish precipitation in the center part of the state. And then on to December, you can see we had well above normal precipitation for December across the state. Here's what water year precipitation looks like across Utah. On the left, we're just looking at Utah, and you can see above normal precipitation for all of our river basins and forecast groups. And you can see Duchesne River Basin just a little bit below normal to normal here. Well, it's above normal, but you can see the distribution of basins here. And then if you're interested on our whole Colorado River Basin area, that's what that looks like on the right there. That's water year precipitation across the whole Colorado River Basin and eastern Great Basin. All right, jumping into snowpack conditions. On the left there are observations from our SNOTEL network for all the stations that have a long period of record through 1991 to 2020. In the center there is our modeled snowpack for our significant contributing areas in the basin. You can see that those match up pretty well with observations from SNOTEL, which isn't surprising considering that we use a lot of the SNOTEL precipitations to drive our model and build a snowpack. On the right there, you can see percent of median percent of median snowpack conditions there for each of the forecast groups. And this is a little bit of a change from last year. Last year and previously, these were percent of normal for SNOTEL groups, where we just bunched some SNOTEL stations together to represent the snowpack in an area. This year, we're using all of the model snow for this, so significant contributing areas for each of the river basins. So you can see that we're above median snowpack across Utah for all of the river basins that we're reporting on here. And to take a little bit of a closer look and compare it to last year's, so here the map on the left is 2023 model conditions, modeled snowpack conditions, and numerically tabulated here on that 2023 column. And then the map on the right was where we were at January 6th, 2022. So you can see that we have a better snowpack in the Bear, Weber, Six Creeks, and Provo River basins, and how those numbers compare between this year and last year. The Duchesne River Basin, we're just kind of a little bit above snowpack conditions according to our model, and then a little bit lower in the Sevier and a little bit, or much lower kind of in the Virgin River Basin. But kind of the main point to take away from this slide is last year around this time, we were pretty much above average or above median snow conditions in our model. And this year we are too, you know, a little bit higher and a little bit lower in some places, but we had a good start to last year's snow season as well. Okay, this is a plot that we got from NRCS that groups all the SNOTEL sites across Utah. Here, the green line in the middle here is the median snowpack across Utah. The black line is the current water year, and then this reddish-orange line is 2022. And the main point from this is we are above where we were last year. We're above median. But this time last year, we kind of flatlined, and by February, we dropped below median snowpack across the state and ended up with not having the best water year in terms of water supply. This year, the good news is we still have a couple of storms on the radar, so we can expect that line to go up, hopefully, in the next couple of weeks here, but it's still really early in the water supply season. So we'll just keep that in mind going forward. Okay, here's a look at soil moisture conditions in the fall. So essentially the soil water conditions that we're starting the year out with in terms of the lower soil water in our model. On the left or center map here, this was the November 15th, 2021. So this was kind of the soil water conditions leading into last year's water year. And on the right is where we're starting off kind of this year's water supply season. So as you can see, we have lower soil water conditions across almost all of Utah. So we're starting off at a little bit drier conditions than we started off last year. All right, so now we're going to jump right into water supply forecasts. Maybe I'll take a second and see if we have any questions or hands raised from anybody. And seeing none, I guess we'll just forge ahead here. So what we're going to present now are water supply forecasts. These are the January 1st water supply forecasts for April through July volumes in percent of averages. So here's a map of water supply forecasts and the color-coded key to the left. As you can see, we have pretty much all greens and bluish greens, which is good news. But once again, it's early in the season. On the right here is a table of median water supply forecasts for each of the basins in percent of normal. So you can pick out your favorite basin here and see what the median forecast is before we go basin by basin. As a reminder, these are percent of average, and the averages are the 1991 to 2020 volumes. Okay, we'll start off in the Weber. In the Weber River Basin, forecasts range between 120 to 144% of average, with the median forecast being 130% of normal, compared to last year's, which was 110% of normal for January forecasts. We'll look real quick at an evolution plot for the Weber near Oakley. And the evolution plot is a plot of our forecasts. So on the y-axis, you have the forecast volume in thousands of acre feet, and on the x-axis, you have time. So as time marches forward, this plot will kind of fill in from left to right. The blue shaded region gives you the 90th to 10th exceedance values, and the dark blue line here is the median forecasts from our ensemble forecast system. So we run our model day by day, and this blue line will kind of march to the right day by day to give you our model guidance. The pink line is our official forecasts. So you can see the key over here with that highlighted. And the maximum and minimum forecasts of record are the dashed light green lines, and then the kind of darker lines in the middle give us our central tendencies, so average and median. Here I'd like to point out that our Oakley forecasts, our official forecast, deviated from the model guidance here to the down here in the blue line, and that just the evolution plot gives us a good way to kind of track that. I'd like to point out here that Smith and Morehouse, this is a SNOTEL site that we rely on pretty heavily to get precipitation into our model. And this kind of upper left-hand plot is the NRCS plot, so you can see that they've gone in and kind of filled in precipitation from daily values. The center plot here is our plot, so you can see that we kind of missed NRCS SNOTEL data here. We have a gap in the data. We do go through, we have a robust system to kind of estimate that precipitation based on surrounding stations and fill that in, but we were missing this data as we were running the model. So we'll capture all this data in a snow update here in early to mid-January. So we can keep an eye on that and follow the Weber-Oakley forecast as we update the snow in our model. All right, moving to the Bear forecast basin. In the Bear, our forecasts range from 104 to 122% of normal, with a median forecast of 110% of normal compared to last January's, which was 95% of normal. So I'll continue to kind of compare our current median forecasts for river basins to last year's to show you that in some cases, they're really not all that different than where we started off last year. Okay, once again, we'll take a little bit closer look at Logan. The Logan forecast is 129,000 acre feet, or 122% of average. Once again, this deviates from model guidance, which is the blue line here and the blue dot, based on kind of just surrounding stations and conditions there. Here I'm showing the Tony Grove SNOTEL site, and you can see that the SNOTEL NRCS has been kind of going back and correcting the 24-hour, the kind of midnight values every day here. So they've been doing a good job of keeping up on this station, which is most likely snow capped. In the center here, once again, is kind of our modeled the data that we have, so you can see that they didn't go back and back correct these values before we could get to them. So once again, we're kind of just doing our best to get the daily values correct there and get it into the model. But once again, this is a station that we'll be keeping a very close eye on here, and we'll correct all the snow accumulation to the best of our ability once we do a snow update in mid-January. All right, we'll move on to the Six Creeks Basin here. Here you can see some of the highest water supply forecasts in Dell and Lambs Canyon and Parley's Creek. Forecasts here range from 114% to 174% of normal, and our median forecast is 135% of average compared to last January, which was 115% of normal. Onto the Provo and Utah Lake Basin forecasts. Here, forecasts range from 94 to 154% of average, with median forecast at 135% of normal compared to last year's, which was 110% of average. Then on to the Duchesne and Price River Basins. Price River Basin's pretty high here with Schofield at 162% of normal, which is also the median forecast compared to last year, which was 125% of normal. The Duchesne River Basin forecasts range from 102 to 117% of normal, with the median forecast at 110% of normal, which just happens to be the same median forecast from last year's January forecasts. And then we'll end up here, the Sevier River Basin, which have regulated forecasts. Regulated forecasts mean we do our best to incorporate any diversions and regulation that happens within the basin. So you'll actually see, we're trying to forecast the amount of water that you'll actually see go past in the rivers. So here our forecasts range from 99 to 135% of normal, with the median forecast being 110% of normal. And that's compared to last January's forecast, which were 105% of normal. And down in the Virgin River Basin, where really we only have 2 forecast points this year, forecasts range between 91 and 108% of normal, which is really easy to calculate when you only have 2 basins. And that ends up being 100% of normal for the median forecast. All right, let's talk about what kind of errors you can expect with January forecasts. Essentially, it's still really early in the season, and future weather is the primary source of early season water supply forecast error. But as you can see, in areas where, headwater basins where we're primarily snow-dominated basins and well-known diversions, we're seeing about a 20% mean absolute error on those basins. And then when you get to places that are lower in elevations that end up seeing a lot more rain, and there's many downstream diversions and irrigations that we might not have as good a handle on, we have higher errors. And you can see kind of the difference between the Bear Utah-Wyoming state line, which we usually do a pretty good job at. You can expect a 21% error in January 1st forecasts compared to somewhere a little bit farther downstream at Woodruff Narrows, where we're still upward at 40% mean absolute error on those forecasts. So once again, it's early in the water supply season, and a lot can happen with future weather between now and April through July. Okay, we're going to move into kind of future weather and early January precipitation. So here's a plot of kind of month-to-date precipitation as of January 8th. You can see we're well above average when it comes to month-to-date precipitation. Lots of dark purples, mostly above 130% of normal here. A little bit less up in the northern Bear here, where we're still above normal, but maybe only 110 to 130% of normal. On the left here, these little thumbnails show kind of daily precipitation that we fed to our model. So on the right is the 1st of January. You can see that January 1st storm come through, and we got a very a lot of precipitation throughout Utah, which is good news for us, all the way through the 6th and 7th of January. So good news for month-to-date precipitation in January. Here's the upcoming weather here, essentially for January 9th through the 16th, where a trough and an associated atmospheric river will bring widespread precipitation through the Great Basin, and we'll see upwards of a ½ inch at lower elevations and up to 2 inches for higher elevation terrains. Then we'll have another system bring more precipitation to the region towards the end of the week. So this is days 6 and 7, but the models are kind of split on the track of that model. So we might see heavier precipitation down in Arizona, or we might see heavier precipitation through Utah and Colorado. So we can all hope that the precipitation hits our area, right? All right, so January 16th to 20th, we have a combination of the eastern Pacific troughing and westerly flow over the U.S. that'll keep an overall active pattern for the Colorado River Basin, and we can expect wetter than average precipitation and near average temperatures to continue. And here's the 18 to 14 day outlook from CPC. Over on the left, we can see the precipitation outlook where we have higher than normal chances to get above normal precipitations across Utah, so good news and upcoming precipitation, and then kind of equal chances of near normal temperatures across Utah. All right, in summary, it is still very early in the snow accumulation and water supply forecasting season. Water year precipitation has been above normal across Utah so far. Current snowpack is above average, above Utah so far, but soils were drier than they were going into last year. Water supply forecasts are near to above average across Utah with minor exceptions, so good news there. And the active weather pattern should continue through at least mid-January. So essentially, we're sitting in a pretty good spot across the state of Utah, but it is still very, very early in the season. So let's just keep our fingers crossed that we still receive above average precipitation and hold on to our snowpack. Okay, so here's a list of water supply webinars here. Earlier today was the Colorado River Basin water supply briefing. And then our next one will be Tuesday, February 7th for both the Colorado River Basin and the Utah water supply briefings. You can put the peak flow forecast webinar on your calendars for March 20th. And then we'll wrap up here with kind of our basin focal points. So here you can see a list of forecasters and where they forecast, as well as other staff within the office. And we'd be happy to take any questions or comments. Okay, I see no questions or raised hands. All right, well, I guess this concludes our Utah water supply forecast briefing for January. Please feel free to contact us with any questions or comments. Thanks for your time.